We've often been told by others that we only use 10% of our brains. The origins of this myth have been attributed to well-known scientists such as Albert Einstein and Margaret Mead. This myth is probably one of the most famous neurological myths, in part because it's been circulating in the media for a very long time. Since this myth is associated with the brain, we need to first understand the functions of the brain. The human brain is unique in terms of its capability and function, and it gives us the power to do all the tasks necessary to everyday life. More importantly, the brain gives us the power to think, the power to imagine, and the power to decide. Speaking on a more scientific level, the brain controls body temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing. It analyzes and absorbs information about the world around you from your 5 senses. It manipulates your physical movement when walking, talking, standing, or sitting, and also lets you think, dream, reason, and experience emotions. The spinal cord, brain, and nerves compose a complicated control and information process called the central nervous system. Working together, they regulate, control, and manipulate all the conscious and unconscious areas of your life. Knowing this, the myth that we only use 10% of our brain seems puzzling at first. Why would we have developed the remaining 90% of our brain if we would only use 10% of it? How can we acknowledge the mentally evolved actions such as conveying our ideas with such a small portion of our brains? These are only some of the many reasons why this myth will remain a myth. In the 21st century, brain scans have shown us that regardless of what we are doing, our brains are constantly awake and active. Unless serious brain damage is sustained, every part of the brain is working to cope with the stress your body places on it. Here's an example. If you're eating a sandwich, you're not actively using your ears. Your mind is focusing on bringing the sandwich to your mouth, chewing and swallowing it, even when you're not consciously manipulating them to do that. These effects are often shown in results conducted all over the world. In 2007, neuroscientists in China conducted electroencephalography experiments on various subjects for 24 hours. The resulting readings showed that almost all regions of the brain were active throughout the entirety of the test, even during menial tasks such as walking, breathing, or sleeping. Not only did the EEG test show that most regions of the brain had to be active in order for the subject's mind to work, but also that the brain was constantly active even during periods of rest or sleep. In 2010, the Mythbusters television show in America decided to put this myth to the test, using a similar procedure called magnetoencephalography, which detects the magnetic fields produced by the brain instead of electrical signals used in EEG. In this experiment, the hosts of Mythbusters scanned the brain of someone attempting an everyday mental task, in which the results showed that well over 10% of the brain was active at once. But in a different way of looking at this myth, researchers in Canada published a theory that if we only use 10% of our brain, if we were to receive a significant brain injury through a stroke or car accident, we would not realize any effect it had on our brain, as it would have damaged the portions of our brain that we did not utilize. However, in reality, if we were to damage any area of the brain, it would result in major consequences. Why is this the case? Well as those 100 billion neurons that work in your brain, the brain is also packed full of other types of cells that are also constantly working. If the myth were plausible, it would in turn be plausible for us to say that your body would function even if we removed 90% of your brain. This theory is stating that if we become permanently or temporarily disabled from only minor damage to some areas of the brain, there is no way that we could function with only 10% of our brain in use. Now, the brain is an extremely costly organ to the human body, in areas of oxygen consumption and nutrient demand. The average human being uses 10% of the body's energy, but only makes up 2% of the body weight. The brain uses up more energy than any other organ in the human body. If we did only use 10% of our brains, and that 90% of our brains were unnecessary, it would not make evolutionary sense for us to evolve such large brains in the first place if we were only going to utilize 10% of it. Well, as you can see, this myth does not make sense. You can see in the tests and theories above, there is simply no way we only use 10% of our brain. The myth itself tests the logical boundaries of science and hopes to disprove years and years of research. But in the end, thanks to organizations around the world, we can come to realize that this myth is well and truly busted. Science 1, myth 0.